On behalf of the Konrad Adenauer Stiftung, I would like to welcome you all to this discussion organized by the Bangkok Tribune and its partner with our cooperation and support. I would like to thank Kun Piyapon, the founder of the Bangkok Tribune News Agency, for preparing this event, of course, but also for our fruitful cooperation, since this event is the last part of a project we started together last year and consisting on photo essays in the Bangkok Tribune, an exhibition that is now in Ubon Ratchathani, a wonderful photo book, also called The Mekong Swarm, and 2 forums, with this one being the second one. I also would like to thank our partners, Decode and Thai PBS, for supporting and broadcasting the event, as well as the Thai Society of Environmental Journalists and the MSSRC at Ubon Ratchathani University for their constructive cooperation with the Bangkok Tribune on this project. It's a great honor to have so many eminent Thai, but also international speakers with us today. So thank you all for being with us. My gratitude also goes to our moderator and all participants on site in Ubon Ratchathani, but also on Zoom and in the social media. As you may know, the Konrad Adenauer Stiftung is the German non-profit organization financed by the German federal government with offices in Germany, but also all around the world. And we have been working with our partners in Thailand for 40 years to promote democracy and the rule of law, quality education, as well as innovation, climate change mitigation, and the 17 SDGs, the social development goals of the UN. And of course, we also promote international cooperation between Thailand, Germany, and Europe. And today's topic, the question of legal rights for river, is at the crossroads of many of these questions. As you know, the Mekong River is heavily impacted by droughts, floods, climate change, pollution, and dams, as well as sediment erosion. The MRC, the Mekong River Commission, and other regional actors play an important role to address these issues and work at a multilateral level on regional stabilization and security. The European Union and Germany are also present in the region to help tackle these issues. They are both development partners of the MRC. They give large financial aid, mainly in the areas of flood mitigation, climate change, institutional reforms, and integrated water resources management. And they are also key donors in terms of humanitarian aid and support for disaster preparedness projects. And one example in Europe, the example of the Rhine River, shows that it takes time and it's hard, but that international cooperation can improve the situation on the ground in the long term to lead to a better protection of the environment, better living conditions in general for the basin, and also more growth and prosperity for all riparian states. So I would like to conclude by saying that I'm very glad that this forum today can provide a platform in Thailand to discuss the question of legal rights for river and also to contribute to improve the international cooperation in this regard and the stabilization of the region. So I thank you for your attention and I wish you a good discussion.
Look at the numbers of fish catching in Mekong River as far as I research. 25% of freshwater fish that been captured. It contributes 25% of the total fish catchings in and Mekong River can help fulfill the richness. It takes the sediment on the ground. People can take the sediment to the farms, and then let's say 80% of population living around Mekong River, about 3 million people, can live their lives with good quality due to the richness of Mekong rivers. On the contrary, according to CPDF data, Mekong River is one of 5 important locations that's been threatened, especially the problem on biodiversity issues. The root cause of those threats reflect what Professor just mentioned, which is about the electricity development project, because there are 11 dams around Mekong River. This is mega project, and that block the water current in lower Mekong rivers, and fish cannot really go and lay the eggs, and the flow of sediment, there's no sediment flow. So these are the impacts. I didn't talk about other plans from electricity development project. So all of these impact to Mekong River. In the past 2 years, press reports on these issues. There are a group of people who monitored and observed the changes of Mekong River for 25 years. They're getting together as the group of people in the year 2020. This group of people, they joined the meeting together in Chiang Khom area in Chiang Rai province, and I think that could be join that meeting too. So they talk about how to set up the Mekong Council in order to create area or a forum and people mechanism engage with different sectors to participate and manage natural resources in Mekong River, starting from Thailand first. So with this council, they have a responsibility to collect and propose recommendations and talk about engagement from the public and working with other citizens along Mekong River. And this is very important and interesting that society should pay attention on. In terms of media need to track and report the progress and reflect the fact, and this play an important role. And Thai PBS, which is the public television channel, who joined in this event, who organized this event. And I should conclude about this matter now. I think that we will wait to hear more comments. Thank you.
The idea that a natural phenomenon has legal rights is, in fact, both ancient as well as recent. Totemic systems in many cultures do not make the distinction between human and non-human worlds that we tend to do in our modern societies and our modern legal systems. But at the same time, it's also quite a recent idea to consider that something like a river can have rights in the same way that individual human beings have rights, or other human entities have rights. For example, communities have rights, or corporations have rights, as they do under certain legal systems. But nevertheless, even though it's quite a recent idea, the idea of what we sometimes call environmental personhood is gaining traction, is gaining interest, and is gaining popularity around the world. The specific recognition of legal rights for rivers started, as far as I'm aware, in New Zealand, where the Wanganui River was granted environmental personhood following a challenge by indigenous Maori groups. In the same year, 5 years ago, indigenous advocacy in Australia recognized the Yarra River, which flows through Melbourne in the Australian state of Victoria, as a living entity, just like any other living being. And similarly, the indigenous Inuit people in Quebec, in Canada, managed to secure for the Magpie River 9 separate rights, including the right to flow, the right to not be polluted, and the right to sue in a course of law. In Bangladesh, a bit closer to where we are now, in 2019, a law was passed that gave rivers the same rights as humans. And it entrusted protection of those rights in a new government-appointed National River Conservation Commission. But this was really a kind of two-edged move. It was a move that raised concerns of civil society advocacy groups that this might lead to large-scale evictions of riverside communities who were seen by this government-appointed commission to be damaging the rivers. So one key issue that this raises is the question of guardianship. If rivers have legal rights, in whose hands are the legal rights of representation going to be entrusted? Clearly, there are all sorts of complications and all sorts of implications when it comes to legal rights of rivers. What are some of the implications? Well, presumably it means that certain activities that threaten the health of a river, or even you could say threaten the life of a river, would become more restricted, would become more difficult. Rights are a form of protection. While rivers themselves might not be able to sue in a court of law, in other words, take the culprits to court for their actions, others, those considered the guardians of rivers, may be able to do so on behalf of rivers. But who or what then represents the river in a legal sense? What determines and who determines which specific rights rivers have and what constitutes the infringement of such rights? Damming a river like the Mekong might be a very obvious example, but what about farmers whose pesticide use damages the river's ecological health? Does that mean they are also taken to law for infringing the rights of the rivers? A huge difficulty in acting on legal rights to rivers is identifying the culprits who infringe those rights, especially when rivers are under attack by so many different human activities, but also from so many places and at so many scales or levels of impact. In an international river system like the Mekong, what legal regime would be drawn on to grant and protect such rights? If we look at the existing international legal instruments, only one of the 6 Mekong riparian countries, that is Vietnam, has signed the most significant international legal instrument, that is the United Nations Watercourses Convention. And at the same time, the 1995 Mekong Agreement provides no obvious legal recourse to existing practices, whether those who would seek such recourse are human beings or rivers themselves. This means that if legal rights to rivers are to be advocated, it would probably make sense to start with tributaries that lie within single countries, at least in the first instance. The Chi and Moon river systems would seem to be obvious candidates here in Thailand, although one question that's raised is whether past activities and associated impacts would be covered were that to happen. And who would be the guardians of the rivers? Who would be appointed guardians of the rivers? A further issue in recognizing rivers as juristic entities that some have raised is whether rivers themselves then set themselves up for being sued if they cause damage to others, for example, through flood events. Ultimately, though, perhaps the most significant value in recognizing rights to rivers in the Mekong system is symbolic rather than providing a realistically enforceable legal option. But who knows, maybe it's more. I look forward to hearing the views of others at this meeting who've long been advocating for the river and those who depend most intimately on its well-being. Thank you very much.
Ten, 12 years ago, we see a lot of change in Mekong River because it was flooded. In the year we got drought, that people people can go across, walk across the river, and then that was the most dry drought in a decade. And I just asked what had happened with Mekong River. How come Mekong River has been too dry, so dry? We haven't seen that phenomenon before. And we know that the dam, the 6 or 7 dam was built and they store water. That's make Mekong River become dry. This is all about a Chinese dam. And we can see a lot of change of Mekong River in the year 2013. Normally, when the water level dropped, people can plant their trees or farms. We used to get, we got flooded in dry and wet rainy season. So we tried to collect all the information, and then we been working and the press tried to disseminate the information. We so concerned. We got so concerned, and we proposed the idea through MRC forum, through the government authority set up the forum with us in Loi, in Chiang Khan, I could remember. And I myself, I joined the forum in Nakhon Phanom province. Let's say there were 200-300 questions. What had happened? So we concerned about when we sued, we filed a lawsuit to the administrative court until the dam was completely built, and it impact to the and it really caused impacts. And we hear from PNPCA. So the water rise and drop. It's we got flooded in dry season and dry in winter season, and the color of the water become bluish, and that was a phenomenon that we saw. So the situation that we see, we cannot really forecast anything about Mekong River, same as the chairman Kun Amnat Taijak already informed everyone at the beginning that even though the government authority has need to solve a lot of problem, it really impact to the society. Look at the river banks. After the river bank being corroded, and then the planning division try to solve the the corrosion of the riverbank, and it really impacts to the farm. We never use fertilizers, but then it is really impact. And the local administrative office then know which law that they need to enforce in order to solve the problem. And then Professor Panaporn will inform to the meeting. And there are many areas that has earth and some area there's no earth. So we haven't done research, as Kun Amnat said, that one lady need to sell her land because the land size dropped, because only the earth has been gone. And then the local administrative office did not know what kind of law that they have to enforce to manage. There have been the relationship, the conflicts, who will manage the conflicts. That's the overview. But let's look at the impact toward the villagers, the local villagers, the biodiversity been impacts a lot. And fishermen who work in Mekong River confirm that in the mid of a year, when Chayaburi Dam was open, we lost more than 50% of big fish, which is varieties. And then the Khong River, the water in Khong, the water color of Khong River has become bluish. This is why our Mekong River in 7 northeast cities, we give the letter to more than 6 ministries to solve this problem. And finally, the lesson learned that we have in order to fight to protect Mekong River because of the Chayaburi Dam and Chinese Dam. I don't know which is the root cause, but I know that Chayaburi Dam really impacts a lot. And Thai governor Chayaburi Dam was funded by Thai government, and it become defendant rather than Chinese dam. This situation. This is what happened in Mekong River, and we submit our letter, and we can see a little progress. But after we went to Chiang Khan in the province, Salakam, there will be Salakam Dam about 2 kilometers from the Thailand border. So there are so many issues that we've been received impact. So it's so hard to say that it doesn't fall in any agency's responsibility. We've been abused, especially Northeast people who lived in the North. People who live in Northeast, they are ethical or indigenous people who live along Mekong River, and then Thailand make agreement to take care of indigenous people to live in rich land so that they can live their lives and have a food security. So I think that we've been abused. And let me share, we try to fight on this, but how we cannot really progress in terms of solution. And the river cannot speak, and who can protect rivers and who can claim the rights of national river that they should supposed to get. Thank you. For the development program, we barriers to develop Khong River development is in the key. Normally, it's in government and investor hands. So we can say like MRC, LMC, it really connect to the capitalism or government. So where are people? No, right? So this is very important. Therefore, economy, or how to drive economy in Mekong River, we've been pressured. Only government and capitalism or investors that involved in big project. And the second problem that we try to fix, international river, as Mekong is international river because it flows through many countries, and we haven't fixed the problem. And this is all about the even though people said we should not build the dam, but people talk about so this is the problem that we can see. The third mindset and paradigm and tools. They use old tools and old paradigms to manage river, and that causes a problem. For example, if it's flood, they're gonna dredge the river. They build water gate, and those really destroy the we should not really build the water gate or build the dam. especially tributaries has a lot of problem because its impact to ecosystem. So what happened? Please observe. So all rivers, people dredge or build the water gate in all rivers. They build a weir or dam, and that happened. This is all way of thinking. They haven't looked in other dimensions. If they need water, if they need water, they take water from, or they release water from Mekong River, or if the river become dry, they will dredge the river. They haven't think about other options at all. How to preserve the river, how to build green area. So we have to, this is how we have to work in parallel. And this is the big problem. What are the hopes? So I think law can help stop development project in Mekong River, but what had happened? So we have to admit that money comes across the borders, investment come across the borders. Look at Chayaburi Dam. I think as I think the court will dismiss the case. And I think that could be another good opportunity to reflect the problem on law, because monies come and this is related to the good governance of the companies. So Chayaburi case may be dismissed, and this is the case that lawyers should discuss how we can solve problem. And finally, about river rights. River rights is very important and it's interesting point, but I think that how these river rights, how these could happen, we have to build good understandings from those who live with the waters, or with those who work with waters. Well, river rights could be created from those who live along the river, can help and drive this thought. Because people considered national resources or river is more important than individuals. We have to develop, and we have to think that natural resources or river is more important than individuals, and that can make river rights become true. We have to really restore river before we can reach out to river rights. So we should start pay attention to solve problem, recover river, and preserve river, rather than remedies or in particularly, for example, like remedies or compensate those who impact. Because at the end of the day, river has been destroyed. So if river can remain, all the livings can remain. So what we call for, we would like Mekong River can flow according to by season. So we have to overcome ourselves. We have to consider, we have to pay attention or give importance on river rather than human beings. Thank you. People said we try to oppose not to build Park Moon Dam. Why we keep monitoring that? Because building dam will impact to those who living along the river. Look at Nam Ngan Dam or Nam Ngan 1 and Nam Ngan 2 Dam. Look at the impacts at Nam Ngum Dam. So building dam will destroy the river and destroy or impact to those who live along the river. River cannot speak. But should I stop saying? We come back and talk with Thai people. What had happened in river? What had happened, because we need to rely on river. We need water from the north coming down, because we need to we need to catch fish. So this is the way of living. We interdependent to each other.
ทำให้น้ำโขงลดลงแล้วก็ทำให้
Okay,
ปลาจากทะเลสาบเขมรขึ้นมาได้
so when we talk about the fish and the livelihood here and the sediment erosions of all these problems, we have the people who went to the lake in Khmer and observed that, well, right now the problems there, it may be less, and we talk to the people in Laos too. We speak the almost the same language and languages, and then we talk about we want to oppose the idea of building the dam. Can you stop that? So all the rivers, all the stream, when we see all these effects to the fish, to the people who live along the Mekong River. Because that time we talk about coup d'etat, right? Coup d'etat, we cannot do anything. And for the when we have to protest the demonstration, many of us have been arrested. So if you talk about building the dam, is it good? What good is that? And they told us that the dam will bring our life, like better quality of our life. So we have these five topics that we asked them. So the first one, the compensation. Cannot hear her.
ในเส้นเลือดเนาะที่โขงที่เมืองโขงเขาบอกว่า
And talk about Mekong rivers. So when we have the dam and some of the we have the problem and some of the disease that happen in the area and it affect our peoples too. When we talk about still waters, right, in the dam area. So when we talk about the compensation, so we talk about insurance, health insurance too for us, the people. So when we talk about the land, the area, well, I don't think our voice it's not as strong as the money, right? Because some may say that they give you money. Why don't you take the money? Well, we we when we discuss among each other, and in that time some people say that okay, they will give us 2,000 each. Will you accept that? So what about one rai, which is one about like 1,600 square meters, right? And 2,000, it shouldn't be that way. So when we talk about the compensations for the housings in the areas, so all of these issues, it affects us. And then talk about the careers that we have in Kong River, Moon Chi River, because many are fishermen and they do the fishing, and in the part they may have some of the barters, and right now they can sell the fish to the other communities, right? Well, in my life I lived near the river, and then my parents, my dad, he built the boat and he is also a fisherman too. So back then we think that it's very like life there, it's very fertile. So Mae Sompong, anything that you like to ask for Moon River, the first thing I like the Moon Rivers to be free. So all the tributaries and Mekong rivers, I want them to be free, flow freely. So when we look at the river, we think that the river is the key factor, the heart. We love the river, but the government, they damage the river. If they really want to protect the river, we need to help each other. We need to make our voice stronger for the government to look at the nature, look at the people, not just look at the businesses or the plant, the the plants and all that industrial thing. Yes, if you look at Brazil, like 29 years already, and the water that we can use, it's not for like less than 3,000 right? Maybe just one district that can utilize the water from Brazil like Dam. So the government make them the model. So 3,000 can benefit, but the damage is for 100,000
9 districts, 3 provinces, and 27 sub-districts. And what else can we do? Because we can just use a small amount of waters for our farming, and then the effect to the people in the area and the fish too, they cannot lay their egg, because when we talk about the riparian, the Ramsar site, we want the water, the rivers to flow freely. When we talk about moon rivers that they have dams, 7 dams, can we just get rid of them? And some says I agree with you. So the fish, they can swim to Kong River and also the tributaries. So for us, the management is like centralized to the government. My idea is to decentralize this power. So Kun Pradit said that the rivers, the stream, it should flow freely, and the river, it flowed to Moon River and continue to Mekong River. So what I expect for the rivers legal right. So for the legal right, I hope that the right of this can be like granted for the river, because we know that the human rights, we have all the rights, the protection. And for the discussion today, we are from like the networkings of the Krong Chimun rivers, and we are all affected from the government's projects and policies. So with all of the development projects, we need to be able to stand up and we can like have the right for ourselves. If we have the right, then we can protect the river, and we can encourage them to see the importance of the river and help them to make the right of the rivers to be seen and to be heard. And when we talk about the legal right for the rivers, and we talk about the freedom, it shouldn't be affected or damaged by the policies from the government, which they didn't include us, the people. So for all this process, the processes, if we have the people in the community, if we have discussed and we agrees to the right of the rivers, the right of the people as well. And when we talk about who's going to give the right to the river, we need to look into the meaning. And when we define the right of the river, so this is our homework, a big, say very big issue for us, and there will be a long talks too. Yes, thank you, Kun Sirisak. And for the damage of Mekong rivers after the dams have been built. So for the ecosystem, the cultures, the farming, the the fishing, which affect Songkram rivers too. So it is like when we talk about Mekong's wound, it's very important issue here.
พาปลามาฝากน้ำโขงจาก
So Cold River bring fish so for young generation, but look at this current situation. There's no water from Mekong Kong River to Songkham River. Many fishes are gone, and the way of living of people has changed. The agriculture has changed. A lot of things has changed. So what kind of rights, legal rights that you want the river need to have? River could be our ancestor, because we've been grown together with Mekong River and tributaries, and we would like to protect the river rights. If someone need to destroy or change the ecosystem of Mekong and tributaries, why don't you ask the people along the river how they've been impacted? And they have to think thoroughly, because we give information to the ombudsman and we feel upset that building dam in Chayaburi Dam, all of them from Thai investors, and the villagers been impacted, and Thai people been impacted a lot. And what about National Security Council has resolution to build Sarakam Dam even further. We cannot turn it anymore. You try to protect the rights of Mekong River and tributaries. And we give information to ombudsman or inspector to call and ask the representative from National Legislation Council to revise or to review. The inspector and the secretary and the deputy mayor. So all sectors should consider the impact. Excuse me, the voice is breaking up again. So let's say how you prepared. We should use our rights that as impact person to protect our Mekong River and tributaries. So this is what I like to say. So we can be representative to call for river rights, right? They are ancestors. The Mekong River is ancestor because they give our lives. And for those people who live along Mekong River need to rely on river. So I think that it linked back to the community rights and how much that exercise our rights. We have rights according to the law. Once we look at our Thai law by constitution, it's stipulate some rights that we need. If you look at Article 43, it stipulates that community and individual has rights to develop or preserve natural resource and ecosystem, meaning that we have rights to manage to the ecosystem, and we have rights and duty to cooperate and support and to protect the national resources and environment, and state should conserve the national resource and should give opportunity for public to preserve national resources. Is being stipulated in the constitution, meaning that public have rights to manage. But in practice, we see the situation that all of you said, like Teacher T and all of you said, that in reality, it's just government policies. We haven't engaged, we haven't managed the river at all. And if you ask me, should we have the law? Should we free up the river? River should be protected and has its rights. I think we have this kind of idea, and this is the what's it called? We can see this idea around the world. So right now, people start to draft the declaration about river rights. They draft universal declaration about right of river, and this kind of this declaration will be international law that play significant role and indicate about river rights. And then they said that
ก็คือเรื่องของการไหลของ
they talk about the flow of rivers, the rights in the ecosystem. River has right to be part of ecosystem, safe of pollution, free of preserve the stones. And this is to protect the pollution in the river and biodiversity, and how to self recovery. If these international laws, if we have these international laws, so all member states should rectify in order to obligate with these rules. And what will be the impact? Meaning that the member state should comply either directly or they can directly comply with that law, or like Thailand, we have to issued or another law, we should be part of the global countries to really address river rights and what kind of rights that we can exercise. As we said, that according to a constitution, we can refer to our constitution, but we may face like if we file the lawsuit to the court, that for example, Lampaniang case, we file our lawsuit to the court, and first instance court said that we don't have rights to sue. You can see that I understand that why we have to call for river rights, because if we use our rights on replace of river, we don't know how the court view that an individual can protect the river, because the court consider that river is public area. If you talk about public area, meaning that those only state can exercise their rights. This is the problem in Thailand. So if they understand the principle that if they consider that natural resource belong to Thai citizen and everyone has duty and right to protect national resources, and that we can help protecting the rights.
Kia ora and Sawati Ka. Thank you for the introduction. I'm Melissa Hayden-Clark. I'm the Deputy Ambassador at the New Zealand Embassy in Bangkok. And I'm really pleased to join you today. I send also best wishes from our Ambassador, His Excellency Jonathan Kings, who was hoping to be with you today. So thank you for the opportunity to address your forum today. I'm really struck just listening into the conversation about the passion that I'm hearing and the connection that I'm hearing from those who live alongside the river. You are very powerful advocates for the river. I've been asked to speak to you today about a New Zealand example that I hope you will be able to perhaps see some parallels with the case of the Mekong. And of course, there will also be some differences. So the case that I'm talking to you about today is the case that was mentioned by Dr. Philip Hirsch when he mentioned the first case internationally of a legal personhood being applied to a river. So the Whanganui River in Aotearoa, New Zealand, was recognised in 2017 as an indivisible and living being with legal personhood. So I think that Dr. Hirsch gave you actually a little bit of background on legal personhood for an environmental feature. It is a concept that requires some explaining, but I know that you're quite a long way into your conversation today, so you probably already have a sense of a little bit of a sense of what legal personhood involves. But if I could just speak briefly about what that means. Just a little bit of context for you about the Whanganui River. So it is New Zealand's longest navigable river, and it stretches for 290 kilometres from the mountains out into the open ocean. And I realise in telling you that, I understand that the Mekong River is closer to 5,000 kilometres in length. So we are talking about different scales, and we are certainly talking about a river with an important difference, which is everything that I am talking to you about happened at the subnational level. And of course, in talking about the Mekong River, you are talking about a river with a transboundary dimension to all of the issues that you are discussing. So I want to acknowledge, you know, at the start of this conversation that of course there will be some important differences. Turning to the Whanganui River, as I mentioned, it is from 2017 that the river was recognised as having legal personhood. And that means that the river has the same rights, powers, duties, and liabilities as a legal person. And it means that the river, in its own name, can enforce its legal rights against other legal persons. So put another way, the river is actually able to sue. So there's a few other things that the river can do. It can enter into contracts, which a river usually cannot do. And it can also hold property in its own name. So a lot of the focus in looking at the Whanganui River is about the legal rights that the river holds. But I do want to highlight some of the softer, non-legal rights that also come along with the arrangement put in place in New Zealand. And I think this is an important element of the Whanganui River arrangements, is that it has acted as a way of organising and bringing together all of the different stakeholders that care for the river, that use the river, that are concerned about the health of the river. It has brought all of those stakeholders together, and it has actually done that in a legal framework that helps to address some of the power imbalances and make it clear who has the rights to speak on behalf of the river. So there was a question asked in Dr. Hirsch's presentation about in whose hands do the legal rights sit if you vest legal rights in a river. And so an important thing about the Whanganui River is that there are 2 representatives that are appointed to speak and to act on behalf of the river and in the river's best interests. And so in the New Zealand case, one of those representatives is appointed by the government, the national level government of New Zealand, and one of those representatives is appointed by the Indigenous people that live beside and are associated with the river. And so those 2 representatives give the river a human face, and they can take action on behalf of the river. And they are supported by a bigger framework that brings together all of those stakeholders. That includes an advisory committee with a few more representatives, and then a bigger committee that is tasked to develop an integrated strategy for the river. So they are all working together for a common objective. And one of the really important things that does when you are a government is that you understand, whether it's a national level government or a local level government, you understand who you need to speak to, who you need to coordinate amongst if there are issues with the river. Now, in talking to you today about the Whanganui River, I am actually a really poor stand-in for the people who live alongside the river and who have that deep connection with the river. So I need to acknowledge that in an ideal world, it would be people such as yourself that live alongside the river that would be talking to you today about the river. So please accept my humble apologies that you have me talking to you today instead, because I want to do the best that I can to talk about the relationship of the people that live alongside the river, the relationship that they have with the river, because that is actually such a critical factor in the case that I am talking to you about. So, as has been mentioned, the Whanganui River case was the first case of a river being given legal personality or legal personhood, but it actually wasn't the first for a natural feature. So 3 years before in New Zealand, a different natural feature was given legal personality, and that was a national park, which is called Te Urewera. So the question is, why were we able in New Zealand to take these innovative legal steps? And the really critical answer to that is about the relationship of New Zealand's Indigenous people, the Maori, with the natural world. So under a Māori worldview, humans and nature are intrinsically interconnected and interdependent. And I've heard some of you mention about the rights of the environment and the rights of the river and moving away from human rights. And I think under this perspective, it isn't one or the other, because basically it's seen as if the river suffers, people suffer, and vice versa. So for the Māori people, they are physically and spiritually linked to the river, and they actually consider the river to be an ancestor. And they have a saying that captures this. And the saying, I will say it in Te Reo Māori, which is the Māori language. The saying is, ko te awa, ko au. And that means, I am the river and the river is me. So that gives you a sense of the connection that the people feel for the river and the way that they view the river. And so that connection and that concern drove the Māori people, and we refer to that group as iwi, drove the iwi to basically take on a very long and very concerted fight to have the river recognised. And so the concerns that they felt for the river, they were things that I've heard mentioned today. There were pressures from development, from farming, from forestry, from runoff into the river. The river had also been quarried and diverted for hydroelectric development. So you may see perhaps some parallels there. And so the iwi, the Māori people, felt a really strong obligation to protect the river. And they had New Zealand's longest running legal battle to achieve protection of the river. And they made multiple petitions to the court, I believe over more than 100 years of going back to the court to try and have the issues resolved. And eventually they entered into direct negotiations with the national level government. And what those negotiations did was resulted in a piece of standalone legislation that went through the New Zealand Parliament, and it put in place the arrangements that I was talking to you about. It put in place and granted legal personhood for the river, and it put in place those other arrangements around appointing representation for the river, the guardians of the river, and the advisory committee to assist them, and the bigger committee that was putting together the integrated strategy for the river. Now, 5 years on, I think there's still many questions about the legal and practical impact of granting legal personhood to the river. But we can draw a few conclusions. One is that there hasn't been any legal action in the courts since the arrangement was put in place. And maybe that is because actually, as I said, an important element of the arrangement was to bring all of the people that cared about the river together in an organised way so that actually issues could be resolved before they head to the courts. It's not to say that issues won't end up before the courts, but it gives mechanisms for bringing the right people together to discuss issues, perhaps before they end up in the courts. And I think the other really important thing that the Whanganui River example does is just to encourage a culture shift and a shift in the way that the river is viewed. And that change is basically to make the health of the river an end in itself. So in that respect, legal personhood may offer an important way, a new way to protect the environment for current and for future generations. So I want to thank you again for allowing me to speak to you today about the Whanganui River example and New Zealand's experience. And I want to close by acknowledging you in the Māori language. So therefore, nō reira, tēnā koutou, tēnā koutou, tēnā koutou katoa, and sawatika.
I'm very pleased to talk about two main things. One is about the policy and regulation to govern the Mekong River as well as its tributary. And the second question will focus on the rights of the legal rights of these rivers. So in terms of the regulation or legal framework to govern Mekong, we all know that, and like the speaker already touched upon, Mekong River is the international river flow from China across Myanmar, Thailand, Laos, Cambodia. So this international river.
So please wait a moment. There is some hot mic and I cannot hear you well. I'm sorry.
Right. So is it okay now?
Now I can hear you better, sir. Thank you.
Okay, good. So in terms of the regulation, we know already that there are three layers as the legal framework to govern or manage the Mekong and its tributary. So the most important one is the national regulation or law, which deal with the how to manage and how to develop the natural resources, including water itself. So in all member countries, they have their own specific national law to govern their tributary as well as the part of the Mekong region in their territory. And at the regional level here I refer to the Mekong River Commission. So all four member countries agreed in 1995 to sign the Mekong Agreement for cooperation toward sustainable development of the Mekong River Basin. So this is the regional level, and also at the international level, there is a number of international regimes which relate to water management and development. One of them is the UN Water Convention. I think Dr. Philip or someone already mentioned about this as well. So let me just focus on the regional level, which means the 95 Mekong Agreement. So the 95 Mekong Agreement has the jurisdiction and a kind of legal framework and provide the both institutional and cooperative framework for member countries, which means Cambodia, Laos, PDR, Thailand, and Vietnam to cooperate each other when it comes to the development and management of the Mekong mainstream as well as its tributary. So if you look at the 95 Mekong Agreement, all member countries agreed to cooperate in all fields of sustainable development, utilization, management, as well as conservation of water and its related resources. So in a manner to optimize the multiple use, mutual benefit, and livelihood of the community and the well-being of the people. And also, it is true that member countries agreed that not all water use, like for example the minor use within their own territory, need not to be passed through the Mekong framework. So meaning that they have their own sovereign right to manage the water in their own territory. And with this 95 Mekong agreement, as well as the 5 procedures, so within the Mekong River Commission, at the regional level, we have 5 procedures. For example, the procedure to conduct the information and data sharing among the countries. We have the procedure to for the water use monitoring, to monitor water use, and procedure for notification pre-consultation agreement between when member country want to develop or construct a project, for example, a dam or irrigation. They need to inform other member country or consult with other member countries. And also we have the procedure to cover the water quality, the flow, and also the water quantity. And the 95 Mekong Agreement also aim to protect the environment, ecological balance, and also to allow to utilize the waters of the Mekong and its tributary in a reasonable and equitable manner. And to make every effort to avoid, minimize, and mitigate and cease the harmful effect of the development project. And also member country agreed to be responsible for damage especially when it occurs, the substantial damage from the infrastructure development, and to ensure the freedom of navigation, to maintain water flow and water quality of the river, including some main tributary like river flow of the Totemic. I think it's all about the snapshot or the background in terms of the legal institutional framework that the Mekong River Commission is working. So you may know that Mekong River Commission comprise of 3 layers. So one is the council, we call it MOC Council, which comprise of the minister from each member country, mainly from the natural resource or from the environment. And the second layer is called MOC Joint Platform, which comprise of the department representative of member country from the relevant department. And the last one is the MOC Secretariat, where I am from, and it is the technical and administrative arm to support the joint committee and the council level. The reason why I raise these different layers of the Mekong River Commission is to avoid the misconception, because sometimes people know about MOC, but they don't really know exactly what is the detail in terms of the structure, because the structure may also define and help the decision-making process as well. So let's come to the second point of the rights of the legal rights of the river. I think the previous speaker, Philip, and the Melissa, as well as Saul, already mentioned a lot of legal concept around the legal rights of the river. What I would like to share with you here is about the complexity and complicated structure of governance. So in order to ensure that a river of Mekong or its tributary have the status of legal rights, it needs a legal process. It has a number of legal process, and again, legal process here, it depends on the government mainly. I do agree that the community, the riparian community, is the one who is supposed to manage and benefit, direct benefit and affected from the river itself. But when it's come to the decision making, government or authority cannot be ignored, and they are the one who who decide as well. So that is the most important thing. We need to think about who is the main actor and the decision maker in legalizing the rights of the river itself. And one, as I mentioned earlier, within the 95 Mekong Agreement, the Mekong mainstream as well as its tributary member country already agreed to be responsible and to conduct some duty and obligation toward the Mekong. For example, the freedom of navigation, the free flow, the maintenance of flow, the balance, the ecological balance, fishery, water quality, etc. If we put this as the right, the responsibility and duty of the stakeholder of the member country, of the river user, we can see it already theoretically. The river has their own rights already. So the question is, who can enforce this right? So like I mentioned, we have different actors, the government, and also the Mekong River Commission play important role as well when it comes to the Mekong mainstream and to some extent tributary, and other communities and stakeholders who have the interest within the Mekong tributary. So we need to work together through the comprehensive consultation and engagement. And we have the different role and responsibility, and we need to reconcile all of this to ensure that Mekong or tributary can be developed in a sustainable way. And we know and we experience already that Mekong cannot be seen like the previous time, like natural flow. It has been already some kind of disconnects in terms of ecology, and because of the infrastructure, because of the dam development. So we need to have both I call it preventive measure as well as the adaptive measure, so that community can adapt. And while we try together to prevent and to provide a recommendation in order to avoid and mitigate all the possible impact from all those development. So I would like to end my intervention here. I look forward to further discussion and question if you have. Thank you.
If you look at Constitution, we didn't see how people engage in water management. But once we have Constitution, we can see that people or public can be more recognized. We have new laws. This is the first step that people talk about power to manage natural resource, which used to be in the central unit, need to be decentralized to local administrative office. And this law has been put in place or enforced for 20 years. They transfer the power to take care of natural resource to local authorities. So if you start to work on river rights, why didn't you start with our community? Start working with the river that been transferred the right to local administrative office, because administrative office can create regulation to handle those rivers, and then they can recognize the river rights. I'm talking about the public basin. The scale is not that big, but if we can start from small scale, I think that we can really address Mekong River rights. Even though the local communities start to be empowered, but the local administrative office did not get budget to manage rivers. Look at the budget for irrigation. The budget for the budget to irrigation was about 1 billion, and 4 billion budget to local electricity or provincial electricity authorities. What about communities? I think number one, the first point, you have to look at the regulations on budget of the irrigation. We need to have representative from local administrative office to sit as committee, and local administrative office representative should be committee on groundwater. This is how we can increase participation, and local administrative office can really involve and get the funds from this budget. And then this is how we can build or support the river rights. I think if we can start from this point, and we can really speak on behalf of the river rights. And secondly, to be honest, look at Article 6 in National Resources Law, because in section or Article 6, Prime Ministers have power to announce the or assign or indicate the local administrative office to handle local rivers, meaning that all local administrative office should inform prime ministers that we have basin, national basin. So prime minister should exercise his power to authorize local administrative office to handle the local river but on our own. We will issue regulation, we will handle our river on our own. What also the prime minister should announce or promulgate or empower to local administrative office to manage the local national resource. So we have to put pressure, the public can put pressure on local administrative office, which is easier than put pressure on governor. Because governor from election, they don't need to listen to public voice. This is a different. So let me conclude that what we have talked today can be real. First, we need to have democracy. So next year, there will be general election. Any prime ministers who not from House representative will not understand. So we have to make sure that to be prime minister should come from House representative. Otherwise, we cannot negotiate. If they have the nominated prime ministers will not listen to our voice. So you can see that if you look at Bangkok governors right now, he works 24 hours. Did you see any other governors work 24 hours like him? I didn't blame other governors. But if you have leaders from elections, of course, the river rights or national resources rights could exist. And people we have can use our voice to address the problem. Thank you very much. Thank you. We can start from regulation, and it could and which ministry should take the next move. The Ministry of Agriculture, which is the host, the owner, and they should take a next move. Apart from Ministry of Agriculture, another spearhead organization that really involved in water management. Let's say we should start with tributaries first. If the policymaker, if the government did not move, if the top level did not move, it's so hard for practitioner to move. But we don't have enough power. The law should be amended. people mindset and attitude need to be changed. We have to recognize the importance of river more. The Lamganui, the river in New Zealand can sue or file the lawsuit towards the court. As if we give the legal rights to the river, that's possible, right? As we can start with small scale. I think that it's possible. Thank you. Professor Pusurasom, well, at the beginning, I am a little confused, talk about river rights. But when I hear many speakers talk about river rights, I think world-class or leading countries, I think that we can really make river rights happen, but where to start? We can start with ourselves. We can start with local administrative office or government. And I think everyone here can start together. And I think that even though we can voice back and address the issue on behalf of the rivers, very clear. Mekong River rights can exist if the power has been decentralized. Well, we have a short time. Thank you. Our network from She Moon Network and Mekong River Network. Thanapon said, river rights cannot exist. Well, I buy in your area. Let me buy. We are prepared. This is improvised. So this is a core of our discussion. My apology that we have technical problem at the beginning, but I can see all of your commitment. I would like to say thank you to you all. Professor Surasom, well, he is the MC, ad hoc MC, and he did he did very well. So today we talk about the rights of Mekong River and tributaries, and whether it's real or dream. So it's gonna be real, right? It's river right is real. If you pitch me, I feel, I sense it. So thank you, everyone. I'd like to thanks to all Facebook audience. So we keep tracking, and thank you, everyone. สวัสดีค่ะ